How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with your boys, Alex and Ryan. Today we're talking about Bryan Reynolds. The Yankees apparently are interested in a trade. It's kind of been heating up over the past couple of days. We're hearing more rumors coming through. Craig and Carton, kind of said a couple things. And now we're sitting here like, what would it take to get Bryan Reynolds? Could they go with the blockbuster option to fill the left field position? Trading away prospects is sometimes a good move if you can get a caliber player like Reynolds who would give the Yankees that much more of a chance to make it to the World Series. Now, would I trade a couple of top level? If we could guarantee that the Yankees made it to the World Series, would I be willing to trade a couple of these prospects? Probably, but it depends who. Obviously, you don't want to compromise your long-term future plans by doing something like this. Now, Reynolds obviously is with the Pirates until 2026. That's when he becomes a free agent. So if a team did trade for him, it'd have to be a significant haul, years of control over him. Plus, he's a tremendous offensive player, a little bit better of a left fielder than a center fielder. I'd say a lot better of a left fielder than a center fielder. He's not a very good center fielder. So luckily we have Harrison Bader in that position. But Reynolds is intriguing. This is definitely a player on the up. He's young. He's ripe. He's playing really, really well offensively. He's a switch hitter, can do a lot of things for you on the offensive side and really, maybe just hold over defensively on left field at an average level, which is all we really need. But Ryan, talking about Bryan Reynolds, we're going to discuss obviously what a mock trade might look like, the interest that is bubbling to the surface from the Yankees. I'm extremely excited to see what they can do here.
Yeah, so, I view Bryan Reynolds as someone that the Yankees can add. And as you mentioned, this would be a blockbuster move, right? I don't view Bryan Reynolds like a top, 20 player or anything like that. But he is certainly someone that could do a lot of things for the Yankees and add a lot of things the Yankees don't currently have. One of those things is that the Yankees have a ton. As you mentioned, they don't have a left fielder right now. They kind of could use that power and on base skills that Reynolds provides. Reynolds, his power in terms of raw power is phenomenal. He ranks in the 91st percentile in max exit velocity. The defense in center field isn't great. It was really good last year, had 11 outs above average, but this year seemed to kind of hit a downturn. His career outs above average out there is positive 6. So, it's interesting to see. Maybe it was an injury issue. I know he had some, he wasn't completely healthy all year, if I'm not mistaken. So, it'll be interesting to see how a fully healthy Bryan Reynolds responds to playing left field in Yankee Stadium, which I think he'll handle it pretty well. I know left field's pretty big, but it's still not a center field position or anything like that. So I think he'll handle himself well. Sprint speed wise in the 75th percentile, he's got a great arm, 80th percentile in terms of arm strength. He doesn't strike out a ton. He walks a good amount. He's someone who just strikes me as a very strong offensive player. Again, I don't view him as a guy who's going to come in and, win an MVP or anything like that, but can he go out there and, give you a 130 to 135 WRC plus in Yankee Stadium? Absolutely. And that would be a huge swing for this team, right? You look at the top of the lineup, let's say you lead off a Reynolds or you lead off LeMahieu, whoever it may be, that you still could have a middle of the lineup that includes, Judge, Rizzo, Stanton, Reynolds in some capacity, in some order. You add some speed to your lineup, which is something the Yankees would always love to have. He's going to be your left field. And he could maybe move to center field when Bader leaves, if Bader leaves in free agency, unless you retain him. Or, if you traded all your outfield prospects in a Reynolds deal, perhaps, now you have your long-term solution in the outfield with Reynolds. You've locked up Judge in right field for a very long time. So, it's not like the Yankees are necessarily, it's not like the Yankees would have a massive multiple holes to fill in the outfield if they brought in Reynolds. It would just be one, which would be center field, which, again, Harrison Bader is currently there right now. They could always extend him. Or maybe they don't trade all their outfield prospects and they have one of Dominguez or Pereira ready to step up and take that jump. When looking at a deal for Reynolds, I know there were reports saying they prefer starting pitching. There are some reports saying that they also prefer major league ready prospects. So, it's definitely going to be tough to put it together a deal because the Yankees' current shortstop is Oswald Peraza. So any deals including Oswald Peraza means you're trading your opening day shortstop. So you have to have a contingency plan in place. Does Peraza stay? Does Peraza get moved? Or does Cabrera, become the shortstop in that situation? Is IKF still around and he becomes the shortstop in that situation? It's something worth thinking about when we're talking about trade now, because it's not like last year where, if you trade Peraza, sure, that kind of stinks because, he's one of your shortstop options down the road, but he's, Volpe isn't too far behind. Now your current day shortstop is Peraza. So you talk about trading someone in your starting lineup, which is definitely different than in years past. But if they want major league caliber players and the Yankees really like Reynolds, they're going to have to part ways. They're going to have to make some difficult decisions. As you mentioned, you can't really even guarantee a World Series. Even if you get with Bryan Reynolds, a World Series appearance is not guaranteed. We've seen some really, really talented teams be put together and still fail to get to the World Series. You saw Trey Turner and Max Scherzer go to a Dodger team that was absolutely loaded, and they not only didn't win their division, they didn't even get to the World Series. We saw 111 win Dodger team, the second most wins in National League history. They did not get to the World Series. We've seen Astro teams lose to NL East teams that were clearly worse than them, the Nationals and the Braves. We've seen, Yankee teams fall short in the postseason. On paper, they were relatively stacked. Things happen, injuries happen. So, you can't guarantee a World Series appearance, but you can give yourself some pretty good odds if you have Bryan Reynolds in the middle of that lineup to go alongside the great bats you already have there.
Yeah, so I wanted this to be more of kind of like an open discussion, just relatively speaking about, is it worth it? You know what I mean? Is it worth it to trade a monstrous haul, a monstrous amount of prospects for Reynolds? Now, you just laid out the groundwork as to why he would give the Yankees a better chance at a World Series. Now, the question is, are you willing to compromise your future? You know what I mean? As much as I love Bryan Reynolds, as much as I'd love to see him playing left field, I personally am gonna go against this one. I'm gonna say I think that I would love to add him. He's an impact player instantly. He fills your left spot with an above average level player. He can do a lot of things for you well. But I don't think that the Yankees can replicate what they have in the farm system. With the guys they'd have to trade, the pieces they'd have to move, you are compromising your future. You know what I mean? The Yankees can win a World Series if they go and get Michael Conforto, and you look at his upside, and we've talked about him. Is he the best option on the market? Probably not. We would have loved to have Benintendi back. Would have loved to have maybe even Michael Brantley. You still got Oswaldo Cabrera on the roster. God forbid Aaron Hicks is there playing any substantial amount of snaps. But I'll tell you what, right now, I think that I would be against trading for Bryan Reynolds because I think the prospect haul would just simply be too much. You're looking at Jason Dominguez. You're looking at, you put together a package for me today, Everson Pereira. You're looking at Clark Schmidt. You're looking at Will Warren. You're looking at Trey Sweeney. And that probably doesn't even get it done. They're probably going to want either Volpe or Peraza. And the rumors are that they want a top starting pitching piece. And the Yankees don't have that anymore. We already gave away Wisniewski. We already gave away Waldichuk. We don't even have that top pitcher to give away anymore. So, you give away Frankie Montas with 1 year of control. I don't think that interests them. I think they want a player that has 6 years left of service time and is going to be a potential starter for them. They could probably flip down the road for even more assets. So right now I say the Yankees, because they don't have a starting pitcher that is, just coming out of the minor league baseball, are really just getting towards the MLB and showcasing elite level numbers. I think that we're going to have to give up even more in terms of just position players to get the deal done. And because of that, I think I'm out, just pull a little Shark Tank bag out of it. But, I'll tell you what, where do you sit right now? Do you think it's worthwhile? Or do you think you would just rather stay safe, play conservative, keep your pieces for the future, and make sure that we have some elite level pieces that we can utilize down the road, even if we flip them in the future for guys? I don't think this team is a Bryan Reynolds player away from a World Series. I think that they have the quality to do it now. I just think that they were injured last year, and we saw a lot of pieces go down late on the season.
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of points that, ultimately no one wants to hear this conversation in terms of no one wants to hear the very real point that the Yankees, what is it going to take to trade for Bryan Reynolds, and is it worth it, right? Even let's say trading Anthony Volpe, what is the probability that Bryan Reynolds is considering as a corner outfielder? What's the probability that he's better than a potential franchise shortstop, right? The probability of that, what is it? You know what I mean? Is it high enough that, that he's that much better that you trade Volpe and then you trade a lot of other pieces as well? Like you said, is this team of Bryan Reynolds away in comparison to a Michael Conforto, in comparison to whatever left field options out there for winning a World Series? I don't know. I think this team's ready to win a World Series right now. I think even if you throw out Oswaldo Cabrera to play left field, that's not ideal. I would rather have him in the utility role, but that team can still win a World Series and will still, probably have. This team's currently projected to win the most games in the American League. They have the highest pennant odds out of any team in the American League. And whether people like that or not, whether people are whether they agree with that or not, that's how it is right now. I don't make projections. I didn't build fan graphs. I didn't build depth. Not involved in any of that. The guy who made it isn't Hal Steinbrenner. It isn't Brian Cashman, right? These are there are legitimate, credible projection systems that would and Vegas odds like the Yankees a lot. There are very few sites that think the Yankees don't have a very good chance to win the World Series or don't think the Yankees have a very good chance to win the American League relative to what is expected for World Series odds. Quite frankly, I think Brian Cashman wouldn't do a deal if he had to give up pieces like Peraza and Volpe because, again, they are, I think, going to impact this team. I wrote about Austin Wells. If you have to trade Austin Wells to this deal too, people have to remember that's a player who has a chance to do something for you this year, right? The Pirates want major league ready guys. So you're not talking about guys that you don't think about over the next 2 years. We're talking about guys who, we're in potentially plans to do something this year. And people can get upset and say, well, the Yankees traded Ken Waldichuk and Alex for Montas. If they had Waldichuk, that would have been the guy they trade for Reynolds. Well, if the Yankees didn't trade for Frankie Montas and, it came out the Yankees didn't trade him because of Ken Waldichuk, we'd all be pretty upset about that right now. You know what I mean? So ultimately, this team is very good. And Bryan Reynolds is someone that I want the Yankees to get, but obviously the price tag matters. I think Bryan Reynolds is someone who could benefit from playing in Yankee Stadium, can benefit from just getting into a ballpark that's more favorable in general, playing with a better team. There are definitely things to like about Bryan Reynolds' profile. It's a little bit concerning that his whiff rate went up a lot and his strikeout rate went up a lot between 2021 and 2022, and that his chase rate increased and his barrel rate dropped. Like, he just wasn't as good of a hitter. That's definitely concerning, but even in a down year, he had a 125 WRC plus. So not really too concerned in that regard. Just concerned in the sense that I don't know if he's a very good or a superstar level player. I think that's the question we're trying to answer here. Is he a very good player? Or is he a superstar player? Because a superstar player, you look at Jason Dominguez and you say, okay, you trade Jason Dominguez for Bryan Reynolds. That's good process. But if it's not a superstar player, right? Why are the Yankees suddenly going to change? The Yankees weren't willing to deal Volpe for Luis Castillo. Why are the Yankees going to be willing to deal Volpe for Bryan Reynolds? Whether people think Reynolds is better than Castillo or not, I mean, Castillo was a more valuable player on the market, and the Yankees really wanted a starting pitcher. And Castillo, even the Yankees still probably would have ended up signing Rodon. Imagine the Yankees with, Cole, Rodon, and Castillo, and Cortez and Severino. I mean, good God, that's not. I can't even think about that because that's so unfair. But ultimately, as you mentioned, there's a lot of moving pieces here. There are a lot of important questions you have to ask yourself about how good this team will be, not just next year, but not just on opening day, but in the second half, right? Your roster on opening day is not the roster you carry into the postseason, right? The Yankees didn't start Oswaldo Cabrera. He wasn't in their plans on opening day. He wasn't in there. Peraza wasn't either. The Yankees probably imagined that as things shaped themselves out, Josh Donaldson would, stay in the top 4 of that lineup, and he didn't, right? Things happen. Joey Gallo was supposed to be the 4 hitter of this team, basically. He was hit 40 home runs with this team. That didn't happen. Things happen and don't happen. So, the Yankees need to have that depth in their farm that can bail them out in situations like that. Even Trevino, right? I think, we've talked about this, through text and stuff like that, but, Trevino's not a guy who's a career 90 WRC plus hitter. Trevino could run out like a 55 WRC plus next year. Who are you trading for at catcher? Sean Murphy's gone. Who becomes that option for you? Who's that guy? Kyle Higashioka? You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that Austin Wells should stop you from trading for Bryan Reynolds, but the Yankees have to ask themselves some pretty serious questions about how important those pieces are to this team going down in the future. How important are these pieces? How important is their farm depth to what they're going to be able to do in 2023? They're infusing a lot of youth to their team. They're relying on a lot of inexperienced guys to do a lot of things for them in 2023. Is abandoning that, and what is the limit for this team? At what point are you just trading too much? At what point are you just selling? You're limiting your future, you're closing your window. You need cost-controlled talent or Judge as well. If Reynolds is a free agent in 3 years, you have to extend him in 3 years. Cole's still on their contract. Stan's on their contract. Judge is on their contract. What is that money going to look like? Brandon Nimmo got 8 years, $162 million, who I think is a better player than Reynolds, but was hitting the market, it would have been 3 years prior at this point, adjusting for inflation, all those things. Is Reynolds a $200 million player? These are questions you have to ask yourself. I think a lot of people think it's as simple as just trade really good prospects for a player. It's not as simple as that. It's never as simple as that. This team, as you mentioned, great depth, great farm, but they need to ask themselves which guys are going to be so vital to this team's success in 2023, and which guys can they expend? And is that expendable group enough to get Bryan Reynolds? Because I don't know if it is, and I don't think it is at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And to touch on your point about Austin Wells, we all know that the league is going towards robo-umps, and we all know that defensive catchers are basically going to be phased out of the game. We do know that obviously pickoffs, whatever, will be important, but bigger bases, more stolen bases. They're making all the right steps, the MLB at least, to increase the scoring of games, to make it more entertaining and make it shorter with pitch counts and whatnot. We're going to see a lot of changes coming over the next couple of years. Austin Wells is the perfect player for the Yankees to be their future catcher because he's a lefty, and he's got really, really good power. He's not a defensive catcher by any means. Like, framing doesn't matter anymore. Prospectively, when he ends up taking over the catcher position, that might be the case. Maybe they use him for 1 year and just work on it a little bit and, just deal with it. He'll be a hopefully above average offensive catcher. Offensive catchers, by the way, are a luxury in baseball. Like, you don't find a lot of very good offensive catchers. It's very difficult to find guys like that. If Austin Wells, who can play multiple positions, by the way, you mentioned like they can move him to the outfield. They can put him at first. There's so many different things they could do with him down the line. But if he does end up a catcher and being that guy for the Yankees, and he's a very good offensive player, that's a luxury. And that's something that a lot of teams are gonna really want. I think that Austin Wells is probably on one of their do not sell lists. I don't think he's even in a conversation. I don't think they want to get rid of him. I don't think they should get rid of him. I think he's the future at that position, or at least some position with that lefty bat. And you wrote a phenomenal article detailing him, and you broke down why he is such a good player. So moving forward, who is expendable? I can't really put my finger on any group of players where one of them is, that let's say 3 or 4 of their top prospects that are expendable. You know what I mean? I think Jocelyn Dominguez, I don't see him as expendable. I think Harrison Bader's probably gone next year after this season. And you're looking at maybe having to go out and get yourself another outfielder, or maybe left field. Jason Dominguez takes over in 2 years, let's say. You look at Everson Pereira, maybe he gets called up next year to try and get some youth in the outfield. Who knows what they do there? Trey Sweeney, good infielder. Who knows what they do there? Maybe they end up trading him. Maybe they end up putting him at some infield position, but I don't think that will happen unless they trade either Peraza or Volpe. And they've refused to trade Volpe for like 5 years now and skipped out on all the top free agents at shortstop. Why would they trade him now for Bryan Reynolds? You know what I mean? Like, it makes no logical sense. We didn't go and if they signed a shortstop and they had that position plugged for the next 10 years, I'd be like, okay, it makes total sense. They didn't do that though. So there's no way they're trading Volpe, and I don't think they're trading Peraza either. At the very least, or very most, I think maybe they trade Peraza next year, if anything, and maybe they transition him over to second or third base. So we'll see what happens, guys. But always happy to hear your opinions and perspectives below in the YouTube comments. Definitely an interesting scenario. I think Ryan and I are kind of in the same boat that likelihood of this happening is probably low. Would he make them a better team? Absolutely. But given the compromising nature of a package the Yankees would have to put together, personally, I'm kind of against it. I think that, the team just needs to stay healthy. And mortgaging your future on a single player can sometimes be a slippery slope, especially one that, like you said, whiff rate went way up. Offensively, he was good last year, but he wasn't insane. I don't think he was worth Jason Dominguez, Trey Sweeney, Clark Schmidt, Will Warren, and Everson Pereira level good. But, we'll see what happens. Maybe Cashman pulls something out of the hat and finds a way to get him without giving up all of his top players. So definitely an interesting scenario, guys. But always happy to hear your perspectives below in the YouTube comments. Make sure to like and subscribe as always. And we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.